I slumped onto the faded floral armchair in the sunroom, facing my folks and my two younger brothers. The house I grew up in now felt like a carefully preserved memory, not a living, breathing home. Mom's legendary blueberry muffins sat on the glass table, their sweet scent usually a trigger for happy flashbacks of weekend mornings. But tonight, the air was thick with unspoken tension. Finn and Leo, my twin brothers, were sprawled on the wicker sofa, their expressions radiating smug satisfaction. My parents, Robert and Clara, exchanged a quick, almost imperceptible glance before Mom spoke, her voice tight. "Maya, we have something important to tell you." I set my lukewarm tea down, a cold dread settling in my stomach. "We've finalized our will," Dad stated, his voice flat, devoid of its usual warmth. "And we wanted you to hear it directly from us, so there are no surprises later." Finn chuckled softly, leaning back further and interlacing his fingers behind his head, a look of knowing superiority on his face. "The bottom line is, everything goes to us." My heart skipped a beat. "Excuse me," Leo chimed in, his tone light and dismissive, like he was commenting on a minor inconvenience. "Yeah, the lake house, the downtown condo, all the investments. It's all for Finn and me. You're not included." The only sound was the gentle rustling of leaves in the backyard. I looked at Mom, my eyes pleading for her to deny what I'd just heard, but she offered only a small, strained smile and a quick nod. "We think this is the fairest way," she explained, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. "You've built such a successful life for yourself, Maya. You're financially secure. But Finn and Leo are still finding their way. They need a stronger foundation." I turned to Dad, searching for some flicker of empathy, some sign of hesitation, but he remained fixed on the garden outside, his gaze distant. A sharp pang of hurt shot through me, quickly followed by a wave of disbelief. For over a decade, I had been the one they called in every crisis. I had poured a significant chunk of my savings into their mortgage, covered countless unexpected medical bills, and repeatedly rescued Finn and Leo from their self-inflicted financial messes. And this was my reward? "So, after everything I've done, you've decided I deserve nothing?" My voice wavered despite my best efforts to keep it steady, the raw hurt impossible to mask. Mom sighed, a hint of impatience in her voice. "Maya, you always reduce everything to money." I clenched my hands tightly in my lap, the sting of betrayal feeling like a physical blow. "It's not about the money, Mom," I insisted, trying to keep my voice even. "It's about how I've always been there for you without question. But now, because I'm independent, because I don't need you financially, I'm suddenly disposable to this family." Finn snorted, shaking his head dismissively. "Oh, here we go with the martyr act again. Nobody forced you to play superhero all these years." Leo smirked, a cruel glint in his eyes. "Maybe you thought if you threw enough cash our way, Mom and Dad would finally acknowledge you the way they acknowledge us." His words landed like a punch to the gut. I stared at my parents, willing them to defend me, to reprimand his callousness, but they remained silent, their eyes downcast. In that deafening silence, the painful truth crystallized. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat making it difficult to breathe. Taking a deep, steadying breath, I finally spoke. "All right," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "If that's your decision, then I have one of my own." Finn raised a mocking eyebrow. "Oh, really? And what profound declaration will you bestow upon us?" I pushed myself up from the armchair, my heart pounding in my chest. "From this moment on, don't ever expect another dime from me." I turned my back on the breakfast table, leaving behind their stunned, gaping faces. The sweet scent of blueberry muffins, once a symbol of comfort, now felt cloying and suffocating. As I walked out the door, not a single voice called my name, not a single hand reached out to stop me. And in that instant, I knew the ties that bound us had irrevocably snapped. I stepped out of the house that held my childhood memories, but this time, there was no sense of nostalgia, no lingering warmth. The echoes of happy family gatherings and childhood security felt distant and unreal. The screen door slammed shut behind me, the sound final and absolute. The evening air was cool against my skin, but a burning rage simmered within me. Driving back to my city apartment, I left the radio silent. I needed the quiet to process the emotional earthquake that had just occurred. Why was I even surprised? Hadn't I always suspected, deep down, that in their eyes, I was nothing more than their reliable, never-ending financial safety net? Back in my apartment, I sank onto the worn leather couch, my hands trembling as I pulled out my phone. The conversation replayed in my mind, each cruel word a fresh stab wound. Finn and Leo, basking in their inheritance, while I, the one who had tirelessly bailed them out, funded their impulsive desires, and propped up my parents' finances, was left with nothing but a profound sense of emptiness. I opened my banking app, the cold, hard numbers on the screen a stark reminder of my reality. $1,800 every month automatically transferred to my parents for their mortgage and bills, another $1,100 siphoned away to Finn and Leo whenever they pleaded with their latest sob story. My parents always patted me on the head, saying I was so successful, I wouldn't miss it. But what would happen to them now? Could they even afford their comfortable life without my constant support? My finger hovered over the Cancel Recurring Payments button. My heart hammered against my ribs. For years, I had shouldered this burden, believing it was my duty as a daughter. But their blatant disregard, their cold dismissal, it had shattered that illusion. No one was forcing me to continue this charade. One breath, two breaths, and I swiped to confirm. A notification flashed. Recurring payments successfully stopped. A tidal wave of emotions crashed over me, fury, resentment, but beneath it, a powerful undercurrent of liberation. I tossed my phone onto the cushion beside me, leaning back and finally exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. Sleep was a distant luxury that night. My mind raced, replaying the endless cycle of sacrifices, the promotions I had turned down to stay geographically close, the vacations I had skipped to cover their emergencies, the constant feeling of being used and unappreciated. Now, when I finally needed a sliver of recognition, a whisper of gratitude, they had offered me nothing but a cold, calculated dismissal. The next morning, my phone buzzed relentlessly. Mom. I stared at the screen, a knot of apprehension tightening in my stomach. Finally, I answered. Maya, did you cancel this month's payment? Her voice was sharp, laced with a familiar tone of wounded disappointment. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. Yes, Mom. Because I realized I don't have to do this anymore. A beat of silence hung in the air. What do you mean? Family helps each other. You know, we depend on that money. I clenched my jaw, fighting back the urge to scream. Mom, family only seems to matter to you when I'm writing a check. I've been helping for years. And for what? To be told I'm worth nothing in your will. You're being incredibly selfish, Maya. Her voice rose, cracking with indignation. How can you act like this just because of a piece of paper? It's not all about money. I let out a bitter laugh. Not about money? I was the one keeping a roof over your heads. If money doesn't matter, why don't you ask Finn and Leo to step up and take care of you? Silence stretched on the other end. I could picture her face, contorted with anger and disbelief. I can't believe the woman you've become, she finally spat. This isn't the Maya I raised. I closed my eyes, a familiar ache settling in my chest. Mom, this is me. You just never bothered to truly see me. I hung up before she could unleash another wave of guilt. Standing in my quiet apartment, a storm of emotions raged within me. I knew the calls would keep coming. Dad would likely try his usual guilt-tripping tactics, and Finn and Leo would undoubtedly bombard me with their self-righteous indignation. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of defiance. I was no longer their default ATM. I was no longer solely responsible for carrying the weight of their lives. I had finally cut the cord, and despite the pain, a sense of rightness resonated within me. I placed my phone face down on the coffee table, feeling both emotionally drained and strangely empowered. Mom's predictable accusations of selfishness and betrayal echoed in my ears, but they no longer held the same power. They were the desperate cries of someone who had lost their easy source of income. I looked around my apartment, seeing it not as a temporary stopgap, but as my sanctuary, my own space where I didn't have to constantly worry about someone else's bills. I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank statement. The endless list of outgoing transfers, to my parents, to Finn, to Leo, stared back at me, a visual representation of the financial drain I had endured for so long. Not anymore. With a decisive click, I canceled each one. $1,800 for the mortgage, gone. $450 for utilities, gone. I sat there, staring at the screen now showing 0 active recurring payments, and a wave of pure, unadulterated relief washed over me. But a strange sense of unease began to creep in. I had spent so many years, so much energy, being the responsible daughter, the one who always picked up the pieces that Finn and Leo carelessly dropped. Now, without those obligations, a void had opened up. What was I supposed to do with all this newfound freedom? I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city lights twinkling below. Life was moving forward, vibrant and full of possibilities, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally be a part of it on my own terms. My phone vibrated with a text message. Leo, seriously? Finn just told me you cut us off. You think this is funny, you psycho? I read it, a wry smile playing on my lips, and deleted it without replying. A few minutes later, another message popped up, this time from Finn. You're dead to this family. Don't ever try to contact us again. I snorted, not out of amusement, but out of a grim realization. I had been dead to them for a long time, just a walking, talking bank account. I put my phone on silent and stepped out onto my small balcony. The night air was cool and carried the distant hum of the city. I took a deep breath. I had made the right choice, and no amount of their manipulation would make me doubt it. The following morning, my phone became a relentless buzzing machine. I didn't even need to check the caller ID to know it was my mother. Finally, I answered, holding the phone slightly away from my ear. Her voice exploded through the speaker, a raw mixture of fury and desperation. Maya, what in God's name do you think you're doing? Why did you cancel the payments? You know we need that money to live. I closed my eyes, taking a slow, deliberate breath. Mom, I simply can't do this anymore. I've given enough. Given? You're abandoning your own family. Have you even considered the sacrifices we made for you? This is how you repay us. A dry, humorless laugh escaped my lips. Sacrifices? Are you serious? If I owe you for raising me, haven't I more than paid you back by funding this entire family for over a decade? A beat of silence, then her voice turned icy. You've changed, Maya. Money has corrupted you. No, Mom, I replied, my voice surprisingly calm. You let money corrupt you. But I'm not your personal ATM anymore. She let out a strangled sob and hung up abruptly. I stared at the blank screen, my hand trembling slightly. Then, a barrage of text messages flooded in. Finn, ungrateful bitch. Mom's having a panic attack because of you. Leo, you think you're so smart. Just wait and see what happens. Finn, don't even bother showing up to our parents' funerals. I read each message, a cold knot of anger tightening in my stomach. Not a single word of apology, not a single question about my well-being, just pure, unadulterated rage at the loss of their financial lifeline. The phone rang again. Dad this time. I watched it ring, the insistent buzzing a stark reminder of the life I was leaving behind. Finally, I silenced it and blocked their numbers. Mom, Dad, Finn, Leo, all gone from my digital world. I set my phone down on the table, a profound sense of quiet settling over my apartment. It was a silence I hadn't experienced in years, a silence that felt both foreign and incredibly liberating. I walked onto my balcony, breathing in the crisp morning air. This was my peace, hard-earned and finally mine. 3 weeks passed in an almost surreal quiet. No more frantic calls, no more guilt-tripping texts. I started to believe they had finally accepted the new reality. I was no longer their financial safety net. Then, on a Friday evening, a message appeared on my screen from an unknown number. Family meeting tomorrow at 7 p.m. Your mother insists you be there. Don't cause any more drama. Short, cold, and demanding. I stared at the message, a familiar sense of dread washing over me. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to continue enjoying my newfound peace. But another smaller voice whispered that perhaps, just perhaps, this was a chance for some semblance of understanding. Maybe after all the dust had settled, They might finally be willing to have an honest conversation. Reluctantly, I decided to go. As I stepped back into my parents' house, the atmosphere in the living room was suffocating. Finn and Leo were already there, lounging on the sofa with their usual air of entitlement. My father stood stiffly by the fireplace, his face etched with disapproval, while my mother sat in her armchair, her eyes red and puffy, as if she had been crying for days. Before I could even speak, Mom launched into a tirade, her voice trembling with indignation. "Maya, I honestly don't understand you anymore. How could you do this to us? To your own family?" I frowned, a wave of weariness washing over me. "Do what?" "Set boundaries." My father let out a heavy sigh. "You've put us in a terrible financial bind, Maya. Your mother can barely sleep at night worrying about how we're going to manage." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So now I'm the reason Mom is stressed? What about all those years I carried this family financially? She seemed perfectly fine then." Finn scoffed, rolling his eyes dramatically. "Oh, here we go again with the money talk. Can't you think about anything else?" Leo chimed in, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Come on, Maya, you're loaded. What's a few $1,000s to you? You're just being spiteful." Their words, so predictable and self-serving, no longer had the same sting. I had come hoping for a genuine conversation, but it was clear they were only interested in one thing. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain a semblance of calm. "If this is all you wanted to say, then I'm leaving. I'm not going back to being your personal bank." My mother's face crumpled. "What did you just say?" I stood up, taking one last look around the room that held so many bittersweet memories. "I have done everything I could to be a part of this family, but if my worth to you is only measured by my bank account, then I don't need that kind of toxic relationship." Without another word, I turned and walked towards the door. This time, as I stepped out, I knew it was truly the end. 2 days later, I returned to my apartment late after a long day at work. As I approached my front door, a sense of unease prickled at the back of my neck. Something was wrong. My door had been sealed shut with a thick, industrial-strength adhesive, a solid barrier covering the frame and handle. I reached out and touched the hardened substance, cold, unyielding, and intentionally obstructive. My heart pounded in my chest. This wasn't a prank. This was a deliberate act of malice. Without hesitation, I pulled out my phone and checked the hallway security camera footage. I fast-forwarded to earlier in the evening, and there he was, Leo, his face partially obscured by a baseball cap, but his distinctive swagger and build were unmistakable. He smirked directly at the camera as he meticulously filled every crack and crevice of my door with the adhesive. A surge of pure, unadulterated rage coursed through me. My hands trembled as I dialed the police. When the officers arrived, I showed them the security footage. One of them watched the video, his expression grim. "Do you want to press charges?" I gripped my phone tightly, a cold fury settling in my chest. If I let this go, it would only escalate. Leo's actions weren't just childish. They were a blatant violation. I took a deep breath, my gaze unwavering. Yes, I want him arrested. The next day, my phone rang incessantly. I ignored the first few calls, but then Dad's number flashed on the screen. Finally, I answered. "Maya, your brother was just taken in by the police. How could you do this to your own family?" His voice was a mixture of anger and disbelief. I responded calmly, my voice steady. "Leo vandalized my property and prevented me from entering my own home. He needs to face the consequences of his actions." My father's tone softened slightly, a hint of desperation creeping in. How much will it take for you to drop the charges?" I didn't hesitate. $2,800 for the damages and the inconvenience. "You're extorting your own brother," he exclaimed, his voice rising again. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "No, Dad. It's called accountability." The following morning, a transfer notification popped up on my phone. $2,800 received from Leo, accompanied by a terse, hateful message. "Consider us even. I never want to see your face again." I read the message and felt nothing. Just then, a flood of messages started pouring in from distant relatives and acquaintances. "Maya, is it true what your mother is saying? that you've abandoned your poor family in their time of need. How could you be so heartless? They've always been so good to you. I opened social media and the truth hit me like a physical blow. My mother had launched a full-scale smear campaign, painting me as the villain who had cruelly abandoned her struggling family. She had conveniently omitted my years of financial support, Leo's vandalism, and the fact that they had essentially disinherited me. The comments section was filled with people condemning me, sight unseen. I sat in stunned silence for a few minutes, the injustice of it all washing over me. Should I stay silent and let them destroy my reputation? No. I had endured their manipulation for far too long. With a surge of determination, I opened my social media and started typing. My family has chosen to make this a public spectacle, so let me share my side of the story. And I laid it all bare. The years of financial support, the constant demands, the lack of appreciation, Leo's criminal behavior, and their decision to cut me out of their will. I didn't abandon my family, I wrote. They abandoned me the moment they decided my worth was solely based on my ability to provide financial support. I am finally choosing myself. I hit post. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Relatives and friends reached out, shocked by the revelations. Some expressed their support, while others questioned my mother's narrative. My Aunt Sarah sent me a private message, her words filled with understanding and empathy. But the most intense reaction came from my immediate family. My phone rang almost instantly. It was Mom, her voice a furious shriek. "Maya, what have you done? You're trying to ruin us." I remained calm, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I'm telling the truth, Mom. Something you seem incapable of doing." Her voice cracked with rage. "Your father is devastated. How could you do this to him? To your brothers?" I gripped my phone, my knuckles white. Did they think about how I felt when Leo glued my doors shut? Did they think about my feelings when I was working overtime to pay their bills? Silence. Then her voice turned cold and hard. "You've made your choice. Don't ever expect to be welcomed back into this family." I closed my eyes, a sense of finality washing over me. "Mom," I said softly, "you made that choice a long time ago." And I hung up. This time, there were no tears, no lingering guilt. Just a profound sense of relief. I had lost my family, but I had finally found myself. That phone call was the last time I spoke to my mother. After my post, the silence from my family was absolute. No more angry texts, no more guilt-ridden calls. It was as if I had ceased to exist for them. But this time, the silence didn't feel heavy with obligation. It felt light with freedom. The evenings I used to spend worrying about their finances were now mine. I poured my energy into my work, leading a crucial project that resulted in a significant promotion. Standing in my new corner office, overlooking the sprawling cityscape, a genuine sense of pride filled me. For the first time, my success was mine to savor, without the immediate thought of how it could be used to bail someone else out. And then I booked a ticket to Greece. It was a trip I had always dreamed of, a symbol of the independence I had finally claimed. Stepping off the plane in Santorini felt like entering a postcard. The whitewashed villages clinging to the cliffs, the breathtaking views of the Aegean Sea, the warm Mediterranean sun on my skin. It was all intoxicatingly beautiful. I wandered through the charming streets, explored ancient ruins, and savored the delicious local cuisine. I was no longer defined by my family's expectations. I was simply Maya, a woman finally embracing her own life. One evening, as I watched the sunset paint the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink from a cliffside taverna, a voice startled me. "This view is even more incredible up close." I turned to see a man with kind eyes and a warm smile. "It truly is," I replied, a genuine smile mirroring his. "I'm Alex." "Maya." We talked for hours that night, sharing stories and laughter under the starlit sky. He was a fellow traveler, a photographer from London, and there was an easy connection between us, a sense of shared adventure. He didn't ask about my past or my family. He simply enjoyed my company in the present moment. For the first time, I felt truly seen and appreciated for who I was, not for what I could provide. As my trip drew to a close, I knew I was returning home a changed woman. I was no longer the Maya who carried the weight of her family's financial burdens. I was stronger, more confident, and finally living life on my own terms. The months that followed were filled with a quiet sense of peace. I thrived at work, cultivated new friendships, and rediscovered passions I had long neglected. Then a message arrived from a distant cousin. Maya, I know things are strained, but your parents are really struggling. Your dad had to take a night job at a warehouse, and your mom is cleaning houses. They look terrible. I read the message, a pang of something akin to pity, but not guilt, hitting me. This was the reality they had created for themselves. They had never learned to stand on their own 2 feet, always relying on me as their crutch. Now, the crutch was gone. I didn't reply. A few weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that Finn had been fired from yet another job, and Leo's social media career was still going nowhere. I wasn't surprised, and I no longer felt responsible. They had made their choices. As the holiday season approached, I realized I no longer dreaded the forced family gatherings. I decided to host my own small Christmas party with friends who genuinely cared about me. My Aunt Sarah, the only one who had consistently shown me kindness, arrived early with a warm hug and a plate of homemade cookies. "I'm so proud of you, Maya," she whispered. I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes. "Thank you, Aunt Sarah. That means the world to me." That Christmas was the happiest I had had in years. Surrounded by genuine warmth and laughter, I felt a sense of peace I had never known before. As the clock struck midnight, I stood on my balcony, looking out at the twinkling city lights, and knew I was finally free.